Picture this. You're standing at the edge of the Grand Canyon, speechless, not because of the breathtaking view, but because you literally can't find the words in English to express what you're feeling. Sound familiar? I'm your host, and today we're about to unlock something that will change your travel experience forever. What if I told you that the difference between tourists who struggle and those who thrive isn't their passport color or their budget? It's their confidence with English. But here's the twist, and this might surprise you. Confident travel English has almost nothing to do with perfect grammar. In fact, some of the most memorable travel conversations I've had were filled with mistakes that actually made them more authentic and meaningful. Today, we're going on a journey together. We'll visit 5 incredible destinations, and I'll show you exactly how to navigate each one with English that works. Not textbook English, not perfect English, but real English that opens doors, creates friendships, and turns ordinary trips into extraordinary adventures. And stick around until the end, because I'm going to share a travel English secret that even native speakers don't know. Something I discovered in a small cafe in Prague that completely changed how I think about communication. Ready to transform your travel game? Let's go! You know, I remember my first solo trip abroad. I had studied English for years, could write perfect essays, knew all the grammar rules. But the moment I stepped off that plane in London, I felt like I was speaking a completely different language. The taxi driver asked me something that sounded like, "Where about you headin'?" And I just stared at him like he was speaking ancient Greek. That's when I realized something crucial. Travel English isn't about being perfect. It's about being understood and understanding others. It's about connection, not perfection. Let's start our journey in the place where most adventures begin, the airport. Think about it. Airports are like mini United Nations. People from everywhere, speaking every language, all trying to get from point A to point B. It's the perfect training ground for confident English. Here's something fascinating. Did you know that airport English is actually its own mini language? Flight attendants, ground crew, and airport staff worldwide use a simplified version of English that prioritizes clarity over complexity. They say, "Please proceed to gate 12," instead of, "Would you kindly make your way to departure gate number 12? Why? Because clear is better than clever. Now imagine you're at check-in. The most important phrases aren't complex at all. "I have a reservation." "Window seat, please." "Is my flight on time?" Simple, direct, effective. But here's where confidence comes in. It's not just what you say, it's how you say it. I learned this from watching an elderly Japanese gentleman in Frankfurt Airport. His English vocabulary was probably 100 words, but he had such confidence, such presence, that everyone understood him perfectly. He'd say, "Bathroom, please," with a smile and clear pronunciation, and people would literally walk him there. Meanwhile, I was stumbling through complex sentences about requiring directions to the lavatory facilities. The lesson? Confidence beats complexity every time. From the airport, let's travel to our first real destination, a bustling local market. Markets are incredible language laboratories because they're all about negotiation, description, and human connection. Whether you're in Marrakesh's souks, Bangkok's floating markets, or Mexico City's street food stalls, the English you need is surprisingly universal. Here's something wonderful about market English. It's probably the most forgiving English environment in the world. Vendors want to sell, you want to buy, and language becomes this beautiful dance of gestures, numbers, and simple words. How much? Too expensive. What's your best price? These aren't sophisticated phrases, but they're travel gold. I remember being in a spice market in Istanbul, trying to buy saffron. The vendor spoke broken English, I spoke broken Turkish, but somehow we ended up having a 20-minute conversation about his grandmother's recipes, my cooking disasters, and why saffron is worth more than gold. We used maybe 50 English words between us, but we connected on a human level that I still remember years later. This brings me to an important point about travel English. It's not just about getting what you need. It's about opening doors to experiences you never expected. When you approach language with curiosity instead of fear, magic happens. Let's move from the market to a restaurant, because food is universal, and restaurants are where some of the best travel memories are made. Restaurant English has its own rhythm, its own etiquette, and its own opportunities for connection. Here's something most English learners don't know. Restaurant staff worldwide are incredibly patient with language learners because they encounter them every day. They're experts at understanding accents, incomplete sentences, and creative grammar. Your job isn't to speak perfectly, it's to communicate clearly what you want. The magic phrases for restaurants are beautifully simple. Could I have? What do you recommend? Is this spicy? Could I get the check, please? But the real secret isn't in the phrases themselves, it's in showing appreciation. This is delicious. Thank you so much. Everything was perfect. Gratitude is a universal language. I once sat next to an Italian couple in a small restaurant in Vietnam. They spoke virtually no English, the staff spoke no Italian, but they managed to order a 5-course meal through pointing, smiling, gestures, and about 10 English words. They had the time of their lives. The staff loved them, and everyone learned something new. It was beautiful to watch. Now, speaking of beautiful connections, let's talk about accommodations. Hotels, hostels, guest houses, Airbnbs. This is where your English can make the difference between a good trip and an unforgettable one. Accommodation English is interesting because it blends the practical with the personal. Yes, you need to check in, ask about Wi-Fi, understand breakfast times, but this is also where relationships begin. The receptionist who recommends a hidden gem restaurant, the hostel mate who becomes a travel buddy, the Airbnb host who shows you their city through local eyes. Here's a travel English secret. Questions are your superpower. Not complicated questions, but genuine ones. What's your favorite restaurant nearby? Is there anything special happening in the city this weekend? What would you do if you had one day here? People love sharing their knowledge, and your curiosity about their place creates instant connection. I stayed in a small guest house in rural Thailand where the owner spoke limited English, but every morning she'd point to different items at breakfast and teach me the Thai words while I taught her the English ones. By the end of the week, we were having complete conversations mixing Thai, English, and universal gestures. Some of the best language learning happens when you're not trying to learn a language. Transportation is our next stop on this English journey, and it's where confidence really pays off. Buses, trains, taxis, rideshares, each has its own communication needs, but all reward the confident communicator. Here's something interesting. Transportation English is almost entirely about logistics and relationships. You need to communicate where you're going, when, how much it costs. But the relationship part, that's where the magic happens. The taxi driver who shows you a scenic route, the train passenger who shares travel tips, the bus driver who makes sure you don't miss your stop. I remember taking a local bus in rural Peru. I had practiced saying my destination perfectly, but when I got on, I realized I had no idea how to ask where to get off. Panic mode, right? But then I remembered the power of honest communication. "I'm sorry, I'm lost. Could you help me?" The entire bus became my support team. Everyone was pointing, explaining, making sure I got where I needed to go. My imperfect English created a community. The key insight here is that vulnerability in language can actually create stronger connections than perfection. When you admit you're learning, people want to help. When you show you're trying, they appreciate the effort. Now, let's venture into more adventurous territory, asking for directions. This might be the most essential travel English skill, and it's also one of the most interesting culturally. Directions in English vary wildly depending on where you are. In New York, someone might say, "Head downtown for 3 blocks, then hang a right at the Starbucks." In London, it could be, "Go straight on until you reach the roundabout, then take the second exit." In Australia, just head up the road a bit, then turn where the old pub used to be. But here's the beautiful thing. The core communication remains the same. "Excuse me, how do I get to? Could you help me find? Am I going the right way?" For simple questions that open up conversations. I once got completely lost in the narrow streets of Venice. My phone had died, I had no map, and I was supposed to meet friends at a restaurant I couldn't find. Instead of panicking, I turned it into a game. Every person I asked for directions taught me something new about the city. One elderly man walked me halfway there, pointing out churches and bridges along the way. Another woman recommended a gelato shop that became my favorite in Italy. Getting lost became the best part of the trip. This brings us to an important mindset shift. Mistakes and confusion aren't failures in travel English. They're opportunities. Every misunderstanding is a chance to learn something new, meet someone interesting, or discover something unexpected. Let's talk about shopping, because whether you're buying souvenirs or necessities, shopping English opens up cultural insights you can't get any other way. Shopping conversations reveal so much about local culture, values, and daily life. The haggling style in Middle Eastern markets, the polite indirectness in Japanese stores, the friendly chattiness in American shops. Language adapts to cultural context, and your English will too. The beautiful thing about shopping English is that it's naturally interactive. You point, you compare, you ask questions. What's this made of? Do you have this in a different color? How much is this? These conversations often lead to stories about the products, the artisans who made them, the traditions behind them. I remember shopping for textiles in Guatemala. The vendors started explaining the symbols in the weaving patterns, the stories they told, the villages where different techniques originated. What began as a simple purchase became a cultural education, all through basic English mixed with pointing and drawing. Emergency situations deserve special attention because this is where clear communication becomes truly critical. Nobody hopes to need emergency English while traveling, but knowing you can communicate clearly in urgent situations gives you tremendous confidence. Emergency English is refreshingly straightforward. I need help, call the police, where is the hospital, I lost my passport. These phrases cut through cultural differences and linguistic complexity because they address universal human needs for safety and assistance. But here's something important. Emergency English isn't just about crises. It's also about smaller problems that can feel big when you're far from home. The locked bathroom door, the train strike, the restaurant that gave you the wrong order. Having the English to navigate these small emergencies keeps them from becoming big problems. Cultural experiences are where your travel English becomes truly magical. Museums, festivals, local celebrations, religious sites, these are where your English opens doors to understanding different ways of life. In these settings, your English becomes a bridge between cultures. You're not just communicating, you're learning, sharing, and connecting across cultural boundaries. The questions you ask reveal your curiosity and respect. What does this represent? How long has this tradition existed? What should I know before entering? I attended a wedding in rural India where I was one of few English speakers. But through simple questions and genuine interest, I learned about customs that went back centuries. Family members took turns explaining different parts of the ceremony. Kids taught me traditional dance moves, and grandmothers shared stories about their own weddings. My basic English became the key to an incredible cultural immersion. Making friends while traveling might be the ultimate test of travel English, because friendship transcends simple transactions. It's about personality, humor, shared interests, and genuine connection. Travel friendships often start with the simplest English. Where are you from? How long are you traveling? What's been your favorite place so far? But they develop through shared experiences, inside jokes, mutual help, and that wonderful discovery that, despite different backgrounds, you understand each other perfectly. Some of my closest friends today are people I met while traveling. We bonded over missed trains, shared meals, language mix-ups that became running jokes, and those perfect moments when you realize that communication goes beyond words. The confidence to make friends in English while traveling comes from understanding that most people are just as curious about you as you are about them. Your accent, your cultural perspective, your travel stories. These aren't barriers to friendship. They're what make you interesting.
Let me share something that completely changed my perspective on travel English. I was in a small cafe in Prague. This is the story I promised earlier, sitting next to two elderly Czech gentlemen who were having an animated conversation in Czech. One noticed me listening and switched to English to include me. His English wasn't perfect. He mixed up tenses, forgot articles, created new words when he couldn't remember the right ones. But he was telling me about his city with such passion, such joy, that I was completely captivated. He called Prague the City of 100 Towers, which isn't quite right. It's the City of 100 Spires, but his version was somehow more poetic. At the end of our conversation, he said something I'll never forget. Perfect English is for textbooks. Real English is for connecting hearts. That's when I realized that all my anxiety about perfect grammar, pronunciation, and vocabulary had been missing the point entirely. Travel English isn't about impressing people with your language skills. It's about connecting with people despite language barriers. This leads me to one of the most important insights about travel English. Authenticity beats accuracy. People connect with genuine communication, not perfect grammar. Your personality shines through your imperfect English more clearly than through flawless phrases that don't reflect who you really are. When you travel with confident English, you're not just visiting places, you're connecting with people, cultures, and experiences in ways that change you. Every conversation teaches you something new, not just about language, but about the world and yourself. The countries you'll visit, the people you'll meet, the stories you'll collect, they're all waiting for you to take that first confident step, to ask that first question, make that first attempt at connection, embrace that first beautiful mistake that leads to an unforgettable experience. Your English doesn't need to be perfect to be powerful. It just needs to be brave. The confidence to make friends in English while traveling comes from understanding that most people are just as curious about you as you are about them. Your accent, your cultural perspective, your travel stories, these aren't barriers to friendship. They're what make you interesting. But wait, there's something I haven't told you yet. Something that will revolutionize how you think about using English while traveling. Remember that cafe in Prague? Well, the story doesn't end there. That elderly gentleman who taught me about connecting hearts rather than perfect grammar, he made me a promise that day. He said if I ever returned to Prague, he would share with me the 3 magic phrases that have opened every door, solved every problem, and created every meaningful connection in his 50 years of traveling the world. 3 simple phrases that work in any country, with any English level, in any situation. Phrases so powerful that they've turned missed flights into adventures, language barriers into friendships, and ordinary trips into life-changing experiences. I went back to Prague 6 months later, found that same cafe, and learned those 3 phrases. I've been testing them ever since, in dozens of countries, thousands of conversations, and I can tell you this, they work. But here's the thing, these aren't just phrases, they're a mindset shift that will transform not just how you travel, but how you see yourself as an English speaker. And yes, I'm going to share all 3 with you. This was our episode today, made with lots of love. If you liked it, don't forget to like it and leave a comment. I would love to hear what you think. Oh, if you can share this video with that friend of yours who loves to learn. Thank you so much for listening, and see you in the next episode. Kisses. Goodbye.